Morning, everybody. I think we'll get going. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your beautiful Friday morning to be with us. We're really grateful. My name is Jamie Graves. I'm the Director of Regional Projects here at the CMRB, and I am the Acting Chief Officer while the board searches for another. We have with us today Mr. Doug Rex of the Denver Regional Council of Governments. I'm going to pull up Doug's bio here. Doug leads a team of professionals dedicated to enhancing and protecting quality of life in the region. He works with the board of directors to establish guidelines, set policy, and allocate funding. Doug joined DRCOG in 2013 as a director of transportation planning and operations and moved into the executive director role in 2017. And under his leadership, the organization has redefined the process for allocating federal and transportation funds, launched innovative programs for services in the aging division, and adopted the Metro Vision, the region's plan for growth and development through 2040. So please join me in welcoming Doug Rex. Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to hearing all you have to say. Cheers.
Don't even know. Getting a reprieve of a day or so from the election coverage in the U.S. is something else. I was disappointed to know that the hotel television has CNN and Fox News, unfortunately, but I tried to stick to CBC. No, thank you all. I'm so appreciative of being here. I'm originally from Canada. I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland. Born and raised, but I've been stateside now since 1992. I went to grad school at the University of Kansas and married a girl from Wichita, Kansas, and here I am. But I would like to just share a little bit. I have been doing regional council work my entire professional career since the early 90s, since 1992 actually. So 32 years worth of experience now associated with regional councils. It's fun to address groups like this that at least have knowledge of what a regional council is, because I play a lot of golf. I was talking to your chairman about this a little bit earlier. I play a lot of golf, and I hate when I play with someone new because I know the inevitable question is coming, right? So what do you do for a living? And trying to explain what this is between the 8th tee box and the 8th green, it ain't easy, right? Because it's not like anything else, right? It's not local government. It's certainly not state government or provincial government. It's something else, right? But the true genius of what regional councils are and what they do is it is the only time that, in my case, 58 local communities and counties, so cities, villages, counties, get together and discuss anything, right? That on its face is pretty cool. And so, we have the opportunity to do that at DRCOG a couple times a month with our folks. And we really, and I'll talk about this, but we really, set in on various core topics related to the physical growth and development of the Denver region, transportation, and the care for older adults in our region. Those are our kind of the three legs of our three-legged stool. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But again, real appreciative of the opportunity. I hope this can be as interactive as you all would like it to be. I'm pretty informal in that respect, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as we go forward, or we can save those at the end, but I hope we do have somewhat of a discussion. So here we go. So first of all, this is the first time that I've been in Calgary for a very, very long time, since that picture was taken at Canmore at my brother's wedding. Back in 2007. It's a little pixely. That I asked my brother to scan that in and send it to me this morning at 5:30. You can imagine the emojis that followed that request. But he sent it to me. The one here, this one right here is now a aerospace engineer, and the other one right here is an audiologist. So not that I'm a proud dad or anything, but I'm real happy. Oh, the other thing I should mention, this is my wedding anniversary. So I was married in 1996 on October 25th. So she's here also. She's in Calgary, so she came up for the weekend. My brother, whose wedding this was, he lives here too, so we're going to spend some time with him over the weekend. All right, a little bit about today's discussion. So I'm going to start just with a little bit of a background, a history, trip down memory lane, if you will, about how regional councils developed in the U.S. It's quite fascinating, quite really, how it all came to be, but they really are a force in the U.S. now. I think there is a true commitment to regional collaboration, and so I want to talk to you a little bit about that, and of course, I want to talk to you a little bit about who Dr. Cog is, how we established the conversations that we're having around our board table, and talk a little bit about collaborative governance, some of the challenges associated with, some of the opportunities associated with that as well, and then some of the lessons learned through my 32 years of experience. I would like to share that with you as well. So here we go. So first, a little bit about, so I was interested, and I never really thought about the similarities between Calgary and Denver until I was coming back up here for this presentation. But we really are a lot alike. I mean, truly, it's pretty fascinating, really. We're in, kind of the bluffs / plains leading into the foothills, right into the Rockies, about equidistant, really, from some of our, biggest national parks, Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, and you all, of course, Banff, and I know that's a picture of Lake Louise, right, which is in Banff National Park, right? Yeah. So. So that was kind of cool. Also, ski areas, we're very blessed. I was telling someone here earlier, any place where you can golf and ski in the same day is pretty damn special, right? And I know y'all know that. It's our playground that we have to the west of us, and I think it's really cool. I think, I'll show you a couple slides here regarding data and just data comparisons between you all in Denver. But it seems like the secret is out about Calgary. It seems like you're going to see some significant growth. You have been, and you will continue to do so. Wildfire risk, with all the pleasantries and living in this beautiful country that we live in, it comes with risks, right? And climate change is real, and some of the associated issues with encroachment of our natural environment are issues that around a regional table is probably a good topic of conversation. We had a fire a couple years ago on the northwest side of our region that just, obliterated half of 2 communities up there. Over 1,000 houses were lost in that fire, and it just speaks to the necessity for resiliency around this topic and a clear understanding of how we're going to mitigate future issues associated with. So anyway, I just want to, one of the other things I thought was quite interesting, and I thought I would share them with you as I was looking, was just, some comparisons between the Denver region and the Calgary region, right? We're a little bit bigger than you all, and I was actually surprised by the density. I was surprised we were as dense as we were in comparison to Calgary. But anyway, it's quite interesting with regards to the population estimates and growth. We're rather similar in that respect. We're expecting to add about 1 million additional folks between now and the year 2050, and you all are on pace at a faster rate than us of additional residents to this region. So having those regional conversations, of course, are very important to addressing those. As far as population cohorts and the like, we're very similar to each other. The Denver region, well, quite frankly, Colorado has the fastest, we're the third fastest aging state in the country. So population over 60 are all the fastest cohorts. So 3 of the top 5 aging cohorts are all over the age of 60 that are growing just rapidly fast. And quite frankly, we're not prepared for the results of that. And you guys are all very similar with regards to your age cohorts. As far as jobs, this one wowed me. We were expecting a fairly good, healthy growth rate in jobs. Yours is just out of the water. And I would like to dive a little deeper into those numbers to figure out exactly what this is. I should say, these are not sourced. I noticed that they're not sourced, but I hope they come from reputable sources. I'm sure they did, but I'll make sure that you all get the citations on this stuff. But anyway, that's the legit, that's real healthy job growth. And I'm sure oil and gas industry has some play in that as well. Median household, median home price. This was interesting to me too. Denver housing has jumped significantly over the last 10 years. When I arrived in Denver, we bought a house in 2013 and sold it in 2022 at double the price. So in 10 years, it doubled, and it's insane right now. It's not San Francisco insane, but it's getting to the point of really, really being a concern. And this really speaks to that about the percent of population within our region that is housing burdened. You can see that housing burden, from our definition, is basically if it's more than 30% of your annual income, that's considered housing burden. And you can see 50% of our folks in our region are experiencing that, as opposed to 34% in the greater Calgary area. And even further to bring that home, 24% of those in the Denver region are experiencing housing burden. Half of their income is going to housing. All right. Any questions on any of those statistics? Like I said, I don't know the sources, but I'm sure they're great. But I don't know. I thought that was interesting, and the fact that we're just so similar. I've heard like when I talk to folks down in Denver, like, oh yeah, you're going to Calgary, and we have somewhat of a connection with oil and gas, right? We have a pretty strong oil and gas community, especially in the northern half of our state, and they're like, yeah, they're just like us. And well, I don't know if you all want to claim that, but I mean, it's pretty similar. Like the convergence, the confluence of two rivers. I'll leave that alone. All right, let's talk about regional councils a little bit. So regional councils, listen, the idea of cooperation is nothing new, right? I mean, people have been doing this forever and a day, but it really began to be a big thing in the US back in the 30s. And we all know what happened in the 30s, right? The Great Depression. And as we find, as there's greater need, there's a greater need for collaboration, right? As those issues really start to rise to the surface, there's a necessity and importance for us to get together and try to figure all this out collectively. And that's really what happened. There was MOAs, memorandums of agreement, that were signed between communities to come together to talk about big issues of the time. Most were related to housing, quite frankly, back in the 30s. But it was, that was really the impetus to what we know as regional councils today. And then in the 50s, it started to formalize a little bit more. The first council of governments in the U.S. was SEMCOG, Southeastern Michigan Council of Governments in Detroit. And they were the first freestanding council of governments, and they're around today. They basically have about the same platform as what they did back then. They really focus on some real core missions, but we are just for comparison purposes, the Denver Regional Council of Governments is the third oldest council of governments in the country. We began in 1955, as SEMCOG formed in 1954, so we're not too far behind. And then, later on, through legislation, through various federal legislations, the importance of regional councils really began to flourish at the federal level. Most notably, the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1962. What they found was that, when they were building the interstate system throughout the country, is that they really enjoyed the opportunity to speak primarily to a group of local governments, as opposed to one, like individual communities. It was a burden they just didn't want to take on. So they really placed an emphasis on regional councils having a role in the location and ultimate construction of the interstate facilities across the country. The other one I might note is the Clean Air Act. That is one that has become of increasingly importance in the U.S. As we continue to struggle with non-attainment of primarily ozone in the DRCOG area. We are a non-attainment. We're actually severe non-attainment for the 2015 ozone standard, and it's a significant issue for us that we're really trying to get our hands around. It's difficult because of just, just who we are. We're sitting up right against the foothills, right, where the air just circulates and comes back in, right? It's kind of trapped in a bowl. And you'll see that in similar places like Las Vegas, Phoenix, some places like that as well. But there is no piece of legislation that changed the direction and path of regional councils and metropolitan planning organizations as this one, iced tea. I'm an iced tea baby. I started in 1992, really right after legislation was written, and I can tell you it was contentious for a long time because all of a sudden, through legislation, specifically in legislation, it gave MPOs/regional councils a legitimate voice, a required voice in the planning process. Departments of Transportation, state departments of transportation, they did not like it. And I'll tell you, it was 20 years before it really started to flow the way we believed it should flow. They bucked and moaned about it for so many years, but I think we're all in a really good place now. But for the first time, it required us to do a fiscally constrained plan. So all the plans that we had prior to that were kind of wish lists, right? Like, if we had the money, we would love to build, rail everywhere, right? But we didn't have all the money in the world. So it was required, you had to have a plan that basically talked about what's reasonably expected to receive in funding. You had to use that to develop your plan out. So that was really important, but it truly did legitimize the MPOs and regional councils. And this is just, the network of metropolitan planning organizations, which most are housed within a regional council throughout the country. And you can see, it's every community. So through that iced tea, every community of 50,000 or more was required to have a metropolitan planning organization. And as a result, they would receive planning funds to do their work from the federal government. So if you were a next tier MPO, so if you were over 200,000 in population, you received the suballocation of monies from the feds for construction of projects. And it's a legit amount. I'll tell you, so we did, the last call for projects we did we finished it last year, and it was $500 million. So it's legit money, right? It's not just a little bit here and there. And with that said, it still only represents of about 3-4% of total investment in transportation funding in the DRCOG region. But it's a great process, and we're so thankful that we have that money's available to us to share and collaborate with our local governments. And here are just some of our sister agencies throughout the country. These are some of the larger ones that we do a lot of work with. Listen, well, first of all, DRCOG is the best acronym in the business. There's not even a question of it. So, but it does get confusing. So we get, I mentioned we have our area agency on aging for older adults. And we have older adults call up all the time. We answer the phone. Council of Governments, yes, I would like to speak to the doctor. And they're a little flummoxed when I tell them that there's no such person. But yeah, it's a great acronym, and there's some bad ones out there too. So which one? Southern California Association of Governments. Acronym, SCAG. Seriously? Sounds like something you should pick at versus participate in, right? Houston Galveston Area Council, HGAC. That's what I call them. They're HGAC, and they hate when I call them HGAC, but I can't help myself. There's another one. So Southeastern Milwaukee Regional Planning Commission. It's if you remove the Planning Commission, the PC, it's sewer, right? So we obviously had the best acronym. No, but it's a great network of folks that we have throughout the country. We meet, periodically throughout the year and just share and, get on that. They're counseling sessions in a lot of respect, right, about, how they're doing work and how we're doing. But the one thing to take away about regional councils, and I'm sure that's true, the regional councils that are in Canada, we're like fingerprints, right? There's no two alike. We all do different stuff. And it's a direct result of what the local governments want us to do, right? Because we are we consider yourselves, and I'm sure Jamie feels this way too, we consider ourselves extensions of your staff, right? We don't want you to think that, you know, I know some folks back home, they think Dr. Cog and the Black Tower, right? And all this work that we have to do, but we're working on behalf of you. Your success is our success. And I hope you take that, you know, as you move forward with your collaborative studies, that we're here to do what it is you want to do in order to make you successful. Any questions on any of that, the history? All right, Dr. Cog. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our programs and what it is we do. I got to share a quick video here. It's 3 minutes. Just kind of set it all up for you. So, Mr. in the booth, if you wouldn't mind rolling that video.
The Denver region didn't just happen. It was built by people with a shared vision and purpose who realized that it would take a willingness to cooperate and a commitment to work together just to survive, much less prosper. That Western spirit may have been born out of necessity, but it continues to shape the region today. As communities developed, grew, and thrived in the region, leaders carried these same values forward. For the past 60 years, local elected officials have been convening as the Denver Regional Council of Governments with one goal: to make life here even better. At Dr. Cog, we do this by focusing on long-range planning for growth and development, transportation, and our aging and disabled population. The region's innovative Metro Vision Plan looks ahead 25 years and outlines a smart and comprehensive path forward. As conditions change, the plan is adjusted to best meet projected needs, and on an ongoing basis, the plan is the foundation for discussions about how to best protect and enhance our quality of life. With regional collaboration as its keystone and regional goals as its focus, each of Dr. Cog's member communities takes action and pursues the ideals of Metro Vision in a way that reflects local values. The result? Dr. Cog has played a leading role in many highly visible projects and accomplishments over the years, including I-70 and I-25, formation of RTD, Denver International Airport site selection, the Colorado Convention Center, and the redesign and development of Denver Union Station. As the region's area agency on aging, we're front and center, protecting and enhancing the lives of our older and disabled residents. Through careful planning, smart allocation of funds, advocacy, and delivery of services, we're here to meet the needs of this fast-growing segment of our population. This region is consistently rated as one of the most desirable parts of the country to live. That's not by chance. The challenges may be different than those we faced in 1955, but what remains the same is our commitment to a regional approach as the best way to make life better. And guess what? At Dr. Cog, we're just getting started.
Great, thank you. Okay. No, thank you very much. That video is a few years old now, and it's interesting to watch. God, recognize some faces in there that have really grown up over the years. My word, I've been there longer than I think I have. So anyway, just a little bit more about Dr. Cog. I mentioned we formed in 1955. We're approaching our 70th year anniversary, which we're obviously very proud about. But it started back in the early 50s when, coming out of World War II, we were experiencing a ridiculous amount of growth, much more than what we're experiencing now, and that's crazy growth. But so Mayor Quig Newton, who was the mayor of Denver at the time, he reached out to the neighboring counties to have a conversation about infrastructure needs. And out of that grew the Regional Council, Denver Regional Council of Governments, and they've all been very active participants ever since. So, you know, with regards to Dr. Cog, we are a voluntary association of local governments. There is no requirement, whether that be federal or state, that requires local governments to be part of Dr. Cog. We have a long history, as you just noticed, that of collaborating, and listen, there are few council of governments throughout the country that have, are kind of on that next level, right? That have really shown and have, again, have shown the ability to collaborate on big items. It doesn't work everywhere, right? I think some, especially metropolitan planning organizations that are not wrapped in a regional council, they have trouble sometimes, and they just do their regulatory requirements, right, with regards to complying with federal law. But there are others like Denver Regional Council of Governments, SCAG, as much as I like to make fun of them. They're really good. Chicago's regional council, really, really good. You know what? I don't even know. But it's not as good as ours. That it just seemed to work. So when I started my career at Mid-America Regional Council in Kansas City, and I remember, as a lowly planner back in the day, that I was hearing about this stuff in going on in Denver, where they developed a voluntary urban growth boundary. I'm like, what are they doing? I mean, that would never happen in Kansas City where I was, or Oklahoma City where I was for 17 years, right? And there's a bit of a backstory as to how that came to be, but it was just interesting, right? So I was always aware of the Denver Regional Council of Governments and the work they were doing. And I was happy, when I got there, that it just wasn't window dressing. There is a true desire to have regional conversations. And I'll tell you another little anecdotal story. So we have a Panasonic office. It's a big innovation lab out by the airport. And when they were looking at locations to put this innovations lab, the national guy, the CEO of the U.S., he came to Denver and met with some, local folks and the like. So as they were driving up to go to this restaurant to meet with the mayor and governor, he was surprised that both of them were out on the front step, out on the sidewalk, waiting for him. And he turned to the local Panasonic guy. He goes, "Yeah, I know. It's just stuff like that just doesn't happen, right, in other states." And I think it just speaks to kind of our Western spirit, right, and who we are. And you guys share that, very similar out here too. So it's kind of cool. But again, it's voluntary. There's no real reason for them to belong other than the fact that, they enjoy the conversations and us trying to make life better for the regions, for the residents of our region. A little bit about the region itself. It's a big region. We're 3.5 million people, which is comparative to the state of Utah as far as population. As far as our geographic boundaries, it is similar to the size of the state of Connecticut. So it's big, and it's very diverse too, right? So we have the Eastern Plains, which we have very rural, mostly, still farming communities, and then we have communities up in the mountains that are, they have trouble getting to our meetings during the winter months, but they trudge down the hill just to come see us all. But so it's a very cool environment to have that many different voices at the table. And part of the conversation, and people always wonder about, do the larger communities just absolutely monopolize the conversation? And it's not true, right? I think what I've seen in my 32 years of experience is that larger communities, they learn as much from smaller communities as the other way around, right? Because local communities, and locally elected officials too, right, in small communities, you're jack of all trades, right? You know a lot about a lot of different things, where, the more complex, larger cities, maybe not so much. So there's real opportunities here for that there to be two-way conversation. And one thing about smaller communities, they're not shy, right? They'll speak up. And I hope that's true here too. It's an important voice, and I think if nothing else, it grounds the larger communities too, I believe. Legacy of leadership, I've talked enough about leadership and who we are as an agency, but it's pretty cool that we have this opportunity, this forum for our locally elected officials to talk. So I look at a couple of folks even in this picture, right? So we have John Dyack, which is the top right there. He's from a southern community, Parker, very conservative in a very conservative county. And then we have Mayor of Boulder in the bottom right-hand corner, which is a very progressive community in the northwest part of our region. They would have no reason or opportunity to discuss, to get together and have conversations other than at DRCOG. And I cannot tell you through the years how many of examples I can illustrate of where that has happened, where very progressive communities and very conservative communities have had an opportunity to come together to have conversations. And it's a pretty cool, unique aspect of this job. All right, a little bit about our governance. You might be interested in this. So we have 58 locally elected officials, 58 communities that participate in DRCOG. Each community has one vote, except one. Denver has two. As a city county, they have the opportunity to have two votes representing one. So one represents the mayor and one represents council. It's a strong mayor form of government. The mayor, he has a designee right now out of his office that serves, but he does attend meetings and work sessions and the like every so often. So we also have, we have one other city county, Broomfield, that has the opportunity to have two members if they like, but what I didn't share with you, it comes with two sets of dues. So I think they are like, yeah, we're good with one. But they're a smaller city county, and but they're very active. We also have some non-voting members on our board. We have three members that the governor appoints. One typically is from the State Department of Transportation, one typically from Human Services, and every now and then is one from the governor's office or somewhere in his administration also participates. The Regional Transportation District, which is our regional public transportation agency, they also serve on our board as a non-voting member. They do have, and I'll share this a little bit later about, they do have influence on our board, just not at the board level, and I'll share a little bit about that in a minute. So we do meet monthly. We actually have two opportunities for meetings. We have our regular business meeting on the third Thursday of the month, and we do that in person downtown at our offices. We also reserve the right to do a board work session the first Wednesday of the month, and we conduct that virtually, and it's similar to what your council board workshops or whatever you call those. In that you discuss more meatier items that will come to the board at some later date. They obviously appoint me. I am their one employee. DRCOG has a staff of 160, and so I am their one employee, and I obviously hire the rest. We have an executive policies document in which is kind of a separation of duties so that people understand what the role of the board is versus the role of the executive director, which I think has been really, really helpful. And it helps with onboarding of new board members and the like too, to get an understanding of that. I'm happy to talk about that at some point if you like to. They adopt budget, plans, and all that kind of stuff, similar to what I'm sure you all do here. We also have two committees they serve on. One is the Finance and Budget Committee, which is pretty self-explanatory what they do. It's very transactional. They allow me to negotiate and execute contracts on their behalf, and recommend adoption of the budget annually and that stuff. The other committee I think is pretty interesting is the Performance and Engagement Committee. So, job number one is the review of the executive director. They do that annually. It's coming up here next month, actually. But also, I think probably more importantly, and has, really this has been a larger share of what they do, is that they're responsible for reviewing or evaluating the collaborative environment that we have around at our board. They do what they call a collaborative assessment every year. It's a survey we send to all of our board members and alternates and ask them how they believe this collaboration is going. And it's a series of questions, as you can imagine. And basically, out of that, they make recommendations back to the board about how we can improve the collaboration within our agency. And it's pretty cool. And they also help us coordinate our annual award celebration, as well as the board retreat, those types of things. So they're very active in the affairs of DRCOG. They just don't show up on that first Wednesday or third Wednesday of the month and say aye, right? They're very active on the board, and I think that's important for them to feel comfortable in the collaborative process. So a little bit, that's what we are, a little bit about what we're not. So at DRCOG, we consider ourselves the library, not the police station, right? And it gets back to a comment that I made earlier about who we are, is that, we consider ourselves extensions of you. We want you to be successful. Now, we have certain regulatory responsibilities as it relates to federal and state statute. So we make sure that that you all are in compliance with that. But we're not, we can't create laws or anything like that. So we really spend a lot of time in working with you all to get to consensus on the issues of the day, right? We look for best practices and try to help you in reaching and attaining your goals. So I want to talk about real quickly on that three-legged stool I was talking about, the 3 different core programs, and give you some flair for the types of things that we do. So first and foremost, we are by state statute the Regional Planning Commission. So we're responsible to develop a plan for the physical growth and development of the Denver region. And that plan is what we call MetroVision. And you heard that mentioned in the video. We recently, so the last time that was adopted was in the spring, early 2017, unanimously by the board. And we were tremendously pleased with this document. This is unlike any other comprehensive plan that we had done previous. This was a lot more transactional in its approach. So we basically went through this whole organizational development process, and part of that was the development of this plan, in which we first developed outcomes. What do we want to be when we grow up, right? So we developed those outcomes, then we developed objectives associated with those outcomes, and then strategic initiatives, right? So the outcomes themselves, I'm going to show them to you. You would think, they seem pretty apple pie-ish when you look at them, but it took a lot of time to get to where we wanted to go. And there was like 6 or 7 of these, and I'll just read them. The built and natural environment supports healthy and active choices. The region's residents have expanded connections to health services. The region is comprised of diverse, livable communities. All residents have access to a range of transportation, employment, commerce, housing, educational, cultural, and recreational opportunities. Diverse housing options meet the needs of residents of all ages, incomes, and abilities. Investments in infrastructure and amenities allow people and businesses to thrive and prosper. The region will increase the deployment of technology and mobility innovations to improve reliability and optimize capacity. So to just give you some feel, right? Again, there's nothing in there that anybody's going to disagree with, right? But you would not believe how many months it took to get to that point. And that's fine, right? I mean, that's what we do. But I think I'm so appreciative of the board's willingness to dive deep and get into the weeds associated with this, and the strategic initiatives associated with. Because what I should explain about the strategic initiatives is that, so under those outcomes, as I mentioned, there's a bunch of objectives, right? And under those objectives, we have kind of a menu of strategic initiatives that, if implemented, will get us to those outcomes. And they're very diverse, right? So, for example, that progressive community of Boulder that I had mentioned, they may be okay with implementing A, B, and C, but that conservative community to the south may not be interested, willing, or able to do A, B, or C, but they can probably do D and E, right? And it was set up that in a manner that we can, the concept was everybody had to contribute, but you didn't have to contribute alike. So I'll talk a little bit about that and lessons learned later on, but I think that has really helped in us moving forward and really accelerating our getting to our outcomes. The other thing I might mention related to these outcomes is that we establish certain targets for various variables. For example, as a region, we wanted to reduce single occupancy vehicle use by 10% between now and the year 2050. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that is monumental, right? And in a community that we believe we have pretty good public transportation access and ridership, and it represents, what, 4 or 5% of total? So it'll give you some context there. So every year, that's just an example, we do like 10 to 15 of those, we have targets. And every year, we bring back to the board how we're doing to obtain that target. What's our trajectory based on data? And if we're not, we're below that line is projecting to be below that target, then we have a conversation about why. And why then turns in, well, how are we allocating our funding so that we can get it back up and in line with what our regional target and outcome is met. So it's pretty interesting. I'm happy to talk about that some more as we go forth. But so Metropolitan Planning Organization. So I kind of alluded to this earlier. It's a federal designation. Metropolitan Planning Organizations. It came out of ICE-T in 1991, and it really did set regional councils up to be what they are today. And it's a very formal process for us, right, at Dr. Coggs. Like, everything flows through MetroVision. So MetroVision outcomes and goals are established. We use those to develop our regional transportation plan, which is a plan for infrastructure for at least a 20-year horizon period. And then we utilize that then for funding allocations, which is our Transportation Improvement Program, which is kind of like a city's CIP, right? It's real money. It's money that we allocate out. And that was the call that I had mentioned earlier. That was $500 million. So, and that went to projects that are consistent with MetroVision Plan and our Regional Transportation Plan. All right, another point about governance that I wanted to make that is kind of unique to Denver, which I think is pretty cool and I think is worth sharing, is that our board is made up of our voting members of our board are locally elected members, right? One member, one vote. But we also have a lot of other stakeholders, right, and partners. And the two biggest partners for us are our Regional Public Transportation Agency, RTD, and the State Department of Transportation. So in order to make sure that our priorities are consistent with what RTD and the state wants to do, we've established this other committee. It's called the Regional Transportation Committee. And Dr. Cogg has 5 seats on that. CDOT has 4, RTD has 4, and then there's some business interests and other special interests also on that. But the real key to this is that the recommendation that this committee makes then goes to the board. If the board does not adopt that action, then it goes back to the RTC for consideration. They have to adopt the exact same motion in order for that item to pass. So it truly does give our biggest partners a true voice at the table. A little bit about the region itself. It's just it's been crazy growth since I've been there. And I know you guys are seeing similar stuff here as well. And we're not blessed with a whole lot of highway infrastructure like a lot of other places. I was in Kansas City, and Kansas City has at least twice the highway infrastructure that Denver has. We basically have a spine. We have I-25 goes north-south and I-70 that goes east-west. And that's basically it. And the cost of land and right-of-way now, future expansion of those facilities is next to impossible. So that's just not going to happen, right? So we've really had some really legit conversations about where we go next. And just give you some idea of the level of congestion that we're fighting today and will in the future based on our travel demand forecasting, is that the congestion that we're seeing at peak hour now at 5 o'clock, we're expecting that to be at 2 o'clock, right? That's not good. So what do you think it's like at 5 o'clock on those days? It's not sustainable, and everybody recognizes that. And I think as a result that what we've done as a funding allocation concept is that we're really starting to diversify our transportation portfolio. We've known for many years that we've had to do this. We're not like cities back in the northeast of the U.S. that basically grew up around rail and the like. We grew up based on cars and trucks, right? And roadway infrastructure. I mean, that's what our history is, right? It was bountiful land, right? There was no issues with regards to the cost of land and right-of-way back in the day. But now we're at a point where we got to make some very critical decisions on how we want to proceed with our infrastructure. And we're really concentrating here going forth on, one, obviously maintenance of our existing facilities, right? We got to take care of what we own. And then there are some capacity improvements related to some hotspots around the region, but not to the extent that, 20 years ago you would have seen, widenings of the interstates and all that. That's just not happening. So we're concentrating on public transportation and active transportation. Those are the two. We are blessed with 320 days, average days of sunshine in the Denver region. And we do believe it does get cold, but we do believe that we have an environment which is very, very good for active transportation, bicycling and pedestrian movements and the like. So we're all in on it, and our investment strategies kind of shows that too. So what I should mention in the $8.2 billion that you see up there, every one of those projects, so maintenance is included in that number, but any additional project has have complete streets elements to it, right? So if it's a bus route, it will have a separate busway or bulb outs or signal preemptions, all the above, right? And then but all of our facilities on arterials and local streets will all have bicycle facilities adjacent to them. So that's pretty cool. The other thing I might point out real quickly is the third bullet there on regional transit. That is not the total investment of RTD. It's like their annual budget is $4 billion a year, right? So that is specifically coming out of Dr. Cog's funding for bus rapid transit. We're building, I think it's 10 bus rapid transit corridors between now and the year 2050. And we're planning on having 5 of those open by 2030. So it's a big lift for us. We just started construction on one of them, and the others are in various planning stages, but are getting close. Any questions on transportation? All right. Okay. Oh, good Lord. Let me get going. Real quick, 2 slides on older adults. So yeah, this is one of those things. This is his fingerprint thing, right? That a lot of regional councils don't have an area agency on aging. It is a federally designated designation. Mostly they're standalone throughout the country, but we've been doing this since the mid-'70s, working with older adults. And our sole purpose, what we provide is what we call community-based services. It's services that allow older adults to stay in their homes for as long as they want to stay in their homes, right? Because once you start to elevate that level of care to assisted living and nursing homes, I don't know what it's like here in Canada, but in the US, the cost rate go up exponentially for the families as well as taxpayers, right? Through Medicare, Medicaid, right, and the equivalent here. So it's a really good program. We've been able to quantify the success of this program. So being able to provide an older adult transportation to the doctor's office or to the grocery store, or quite frankly, to socialize with other older adults or family, because isolation is a big thing with older adults. That gives them new life, right? So our 2 biggest programs is transportation services and nutrition. So we provide Meals on Wheels. You probably heard that term if you don't have it here. We provide funding to a couple different community-based organizations that provide Meals on Wheels to our seniors. Volunteers for America is probably the biggest one. And it's probably about $10 million a year we provide to them for their services. And by doing so, again, we're able to keep folks in their homes a lot longer. And it's listen, I come from the planning engineering background, and having this social services arm I've been really proud of it. I've really dug in deep into this because I've really enjoyed the work that we do, because you can only build so much asphalt. You don't get too excited about asphalt, but when you're changing people's lives, it's really cool. And my wife's a social worker, so I had instant street cred with the AAA staff, so they loved me right away. But it's a really, really cool program. All right, any questions on any of our programs? I know it's a lot. All right, let's have a conversation. Yes, sir.
Aging for seniors seems like something that's totally separate from general regional government.
Yeah.
How did that sort of come together?
Yeah.
It's a little bit less relevant for this group.
Indeed. Yeah, it's a really great question. And quite frankly, I think it's a lot of things. It was based on need at the time. We're like, there was this federal designation out there. There was no one to really take it on at the time. And the locally elected officials have already gotten together, to talk about transportation and physical growth and development in the region. And we're like, well, how about Dr. Cog taking on? And it was really as simple as that. There was no real calculation as to, why or want. And I think that's how it happens, and we'll talk about that in, lessons learned here too, right, with regards to how various regional councils are shaped, right, is based on need. Yeah. So, all right, do great places just happen? I know it's rhetorical. We all know great places just don't happen, right? But what we do know is that places, and this has been studied to death, that places around the country that have really thrived, around the country, internationally, around the world, have been those that have had a willingness to have really difficult conversations about big items, right? And I would suggest to you that those big, difficult conversations occur multi-jurisdictionally and not just within one community. So, again, I like to tell you this is what regional planning is like, but it ain't, right? It's this. I mean, truly, it's hard, right? Because, you have, 8 communities as part of your regional council here right now? And it's diverse, right? I mean, there's a lot of different things that you have, you're wanting to do within your local constituencies, right? The reason you were elected, right? But I think if the deeper you dive into things, you'll find, of course, that community next door is having the same complexities and issues that you are. But there are some big ones that I believe through the years that I've seen a lot of success on, and transportation and housing are ones that seem very obvious to me. We just recently developed a regional housing assessment, and that was simply because our board, our communities realized that, listen, it's a regional housing market. I mean, you can't do housing without a clear understanding of what your neighboring communities are doing too, to make sure there's coordination. Transportation is, of course, the most obvious one, right? It's like, Joe, Jane, citizen, they don't care if they're traveling on a roadway that's in Parker or Boulder, right? They just want to get from point A to point B as quickly as they can. And the importance of coordinating to make sure, if nothing else, that lanes are coming together at intersections, at boundaries, is obviously very important. And I don't mean to be, flippant on that. I know your engineers and planners are doing some great work and working with their communities. So just some of the challenges that I've heard through the years about regional planning and what its role might be, and some of the frustrations and maybe eye rolls that we get through the years about what we are. This regional versus parochial interest. And, again, that's real, and I think it's okay to admit that, right? I mean, it's not about getting in your business. It's about making what your business is better. And I think that's okay. But I think at Dr. Cog, I know we've always really harped in our onboarding of our locally elected officials, our board members, is to try to come in with that regional hat, right? And take off that parochial toque. You know what I mean? And really just try to embrace the conversation that you have, that you're going to have around that board table. And it's been real successful. Just another level of government. Yeah, we kind of are, but we're not. Again, we're extensions of you. It's just giving you that opportunity, a forum for you to have that conversation. Our board members will tell you, yeah, sure, The decisions that we make, the policy that we develop is all great, but those opportunities for them to socialize with other board members it's just as important to them. Because I'll give you an example. The fire up in that I shown a slide with earlier. Mayor Ashley Stolzman, who was mayor of Louisville, that basically lost a third of their households in that fire. She, because of her existence on the DRCOG board, she reached out to the Denver board rep, who was council member Kevin Flynn, and looking for resources. She said if she did not have that connection, she wouldn't have known where to go. So I think that, you know what I mean? So I think that interplay is really cool. It's just not about the big policy stuff, but it's that intimate interactions that board members have that I think is pretty important. No regulatory authority, I've talked about that, but of course we do have compliance stuff that we do, and we make sure that you're all in compliance, or not you all, our folks, with federal stuff. And diverse interests, and I'll talk about that here in a second. So I'm going to talk a little bit about lessons learned now with regards, and I just have 3 that are really raised to the top for me through the years. And the first one is associated about filling the void. And I think that really speaks to, and it speaks to the thing that was mentioned a second ago about the Erie Agency on Aging. There was nobody to really take that on, right? So there was an opportunity for us to step in and take that up and build it up and making sure there's regional collaboration around that topic. The same with the housing was another big one for us. So I think it's really important that we have all those voices at the table to make sure that we're having the conversations that we want to have. And I'm going to ask the gentleman on the switchboard to play this video, if he would.
Board service is a big commitment, but I think it's worthwhile because what you are doing is helping to make decisions and prioritize things in a way that helps the whole region. If we didn't have each of the entities, each of the cities and the counties and the towns in the region helping to make those decisions, we would miss something. So it's worth it because the perspective you bring is one that we need to make the right decision. We can't do everything, but if we do the most important things and we have input from everyone, we're going to make a difference in people's lives.
City County at Denver, and she served on board for many, many years. And just give you a flair for the quality of folks that we have on our board. But I think, again, lean into those opportunities. Like we did water quality for a long time at DRCOG, and it just got too big for us, right? Ultimately, we ended up, there's another agency that does that work now. But it was something that at the time, it was legit opportunity for us to be able to facilitate those conversations with our members. Then when it was ready, it was then moved on to somebody else. And I just think we're never scared on having those big complex conversations. I'm sure you're not either, but look for those opportunities in which you can do that. And here are a couple of examples, and I mentioned both of these. So bus rapid transit. So we're all in on bus rapid transit. I mean, we're really putting a lot of resources towards this now. And we're hoping to have, it says 4 right, well, it shows 4 right there, be open between now and 2030, but that's actually 5. The one that's missing is one up in Boulder that's already under construction. These 4 are not yet under construction, although the East Colfax one just had a groundbreaking a couple weeks ago. So we're all in. So bus rapid transit is one thing that we're really going in on hard, and the regional housing assessment is another one. So in the Denver region, based on this assessment, we know we need 511,000 units between now and the year 2050. That's a lot, right? 511,000 units. But I think more than anything is the diversification of that housing too. We're like you all too, I'm sure. The vast majority, 90+% of our housing stock is single-family detached housing, right? Which will always be a very large percent of our total, and it's great. But I think what we've recognized is that there's a need for diversification of that housing stock too, to make sure that we're able to provide different types of housing for different households, right? Now I'll give you an example. So in our community, households with no children, households with children will basically remain flat between now and the year 2050. Households without children is like that. So the question is, are we prepared for the type of housing that this group wants? And the answer is no. So we're really having some really good conversations with all of our member local governments, because there are opportunities to so TOD development, transit-oriented developments, mixed-use developments are the vast majority of planning permits, permits that we're seeing now. And it's been a good conversation. I mean, listen, we have communities that are, they're not all Denvers, right, of the world, right, where there are probably a lot of opportunities for density. But there are opportunities within each of those communities, and we've identified those for our local governments where that type of density, mixed-use, TOD development is possible. And we refer to those as urban centers, and we've identified over 100 of those all throughout our region in each of our communities. And most of our communities have adjusted their land use ordinances to reflect those urban centers. So just kind of FYI, willing to talk about that some more if you're willing.
Are you talking about the difference between market housing and non-market housing? Are you setting percentages for percent of the market that's non-market?
Yeah, great question. So I will tell you, so part of that 511,000 units is that the vast majority of those is really 0 to 60 AMI, or area median income. So we recognize there's a huge gap of affordable housing for, it's really, it's teachers, it's firefighters, police officers, right, that are really being just priced out of our community. And ultimately, it's going to have an economic development effect sooner or later, and it's starting to happen. So several communities, I won't say at the regional level we've had that conversation yet, and the only reason is because our next step is that now that we have the assessment done, we're now going to do a regional housing strategy, and that strategy will include a very direct conversation about percentage of market-based versus yeah, right. And I know, so for example, like the City County of Denver, they've already implemented percent of housing developments that are done, that a certain percent, I think it's like 8%, have to be deed restricted, for example, in higher density developments. But they've gone as high as, I know there was just a development that was approved by City Council on Tuesday. It's in the parking lot of where the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche play. They're gonna. It's a huge development. It's like 40,000. I mean, that can't be right. I was going to say 40 housing dwelling units. That can't be right. But it's significant. But 14% of those units will be deed restricted, which is higher than what their average is. So those are real conversations that are occurring right now. Lesson learned number 2: celebrate successes. If you wouldn't mind playing this video, please.
Well, I do it because I'm passionate about working together as groups. We've learned through a number of years of my having served on council before becoming mayor, we're effective when we work together. Not every project you start will get done in the same time you're on the board. We start these out many years in advance and starting to build funding for projects. So we may start a project in 2014 that won't even start until 2025. So it's not necessarily what you get done while you're here, but it's what you do while you're here.
Minster, one of our communities, and I kind of chuckle myself when I see it because it's the only time I think I've ever seen him without a cowboy hat on. He's all in on it. He's a great man. He was former chair of the DRCOG board as well. But I think it is important, right, because of what we do and the type of work that we do, that we truly take opportunities to celebrate the successes that we have. And these were mentioned in the video too, right? And DRCOG has had a pretty big hand through the years of getting these things constructed ultimately, right? most notably, I think the airport one, Denver International Airport. We facilitated. We were the site selection committee for that. Anybody been to DIA? Yeah, oh golly, quite a few. Yeah, back in the day, now I wasn't there, but people hated it. Oh my God, did they hate it? Because it's so far out from the central city, right? I mean, people was like, this is in western Kansas, what the hell were you guys thinking? All that kind of good stuff, but now it has really blossomed into something. The economic development benefits that were considered back in the planning process back then is really coming to fruition now. They're developing their whole megatropolis concept out there. It's in the top 5 busiest airports in the world. And I think that's all in part due to some very, very careful planning that was done back in the day. So that's pretty cool. And God, the Colorado Rockies, they're terrible. I don't even want to talk about them. I live a block north of this place, and but I still can't believe how they draw. It speaks again to we're a destination city, right? So when like the Chicago, when the Cubs are playing, or the Dodgers, oh my God, downtown's just taken over. Like Cub fans are like rats. They're all over the place. Anywho. So yeah, celebrate success. And they don't have to be big infrastructure projects, right? It's an interchange project. I just went to a ribbon cutting on an interchange project on the south side of the region. Or as I mentioned, like the East Colfax, BRT just had a groundbreaking. We've opened up bike lanes, right? Everything. But take an opportunity to celebrate those successes, because those successes are your successes. And you know, it's frustrating work sometimes, right, and trying to reach consensus. But when you do get there, please take an opportunity to celebrate it. And last but not least, and quite frankly, I think this is the most important, is to embrace the differences that each of our communities have. It's what makes you a region, right? And I'd spoken this earlier with regards to our Metro Vision plan. It's like, you know, we can't expect all of our member local governments to be able to implement the same things together, especially in a region. I'm sure it's the same here, as diverse as you all are, and we're very diverse too. It's like it's just impossible and we try to really respect the individual ideologies of those communities. But we do provide those options, and I think when they come to the table, there's an understanding that they have to do something to get us to where our ultimate goals are. So I would strongly encourage you to really lean in on the differences that we have and understand those differences. I think reaching consensus as a result of that really is a big deal. Our Metro Vision plan, it passed unanimously in 2017, but an hour before that vote, it wasn't passing unanimously. So you know, so there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes on this stuff. But I think it's truly a great aspect of this work I do. I get to have a conversation with so many different folks and listen to their wants and needs, because you all represent the larger community of residents, right? And we want to make sure that those voices are heard. But the bottom one is like, listen, it's okay to agree to disagree on some things and just move on, you know? And you know, and just it's nothing personal. It's just that people have different thoughts and beliefs about what a community should look like, and I would strongly encourage that too. I hate to leave it on a agree to disagree, but that's kind of where I am. But I'd be happy to take any questions you might have about any of our programs, just philosophically how we think. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the presentation. Really insightful. I thought I knew something about these organizations, but I've learned a lot. My question is, you're very mobility focused, right? So you have this, and I know there's other things happening too, but you have a 20-year sort of constrained capital plan. You know what's going on. You know what you're going to do. How do your member jurisdictions phase their utility and other servicing infrastructure and make development approvals in response to that? Are those other decisions that they do that probably aren't coming to you
Right.
lined up with that? Are they doing other things? Like how does that all sync together at that sort of level?
Yeah, great Great question, and I kind of chuckle. I don't know if you heard me, because there's a lot of conversation at the state capitol right now with regards to, listen, Colorado's a huge local control state, right? And there's big concerns because of the housing crisis that we have in our state, that the state has begun to lean in on that and require certain things that local governments do related to this, related to housing and infrastructure investment. And our communities balk at that. Of course, it's it's the camel's nose under the tent. What's next if you allow this to happen, right? But to your point, with regards to infrastructure investment and the like, I think what we do, we just establish kind of the skeletal, right, of what is to happen. This is what collectively we have agreed that we want it to look like. And I know utility stuff is not easy. I know it's not easy for us, right? Because, well, one, you have to concentrate on, it's third party, right? For us, it's it's utility companies that actually have to, they have to expand in order to do that. And it's some projects, it's millions and millions of dollars to do that and get them on board to do that. And local governments can't afford to do all that themselves, right? I think it's, to your point, we don't get into that micro level with regards to infrastructure improvements, utility expansions, or relocations, or stuff like that. We just set that skeletal, right? This is where we want to go. You decide how we're going to get there. Yes, sir.
A bit of a follow-up on that question. I'm curious if you can talk about your water situation in Denver.
Yeah.
And your source water protection and how you plan to accommodate the addition of 1 million people.
Yeah, the new gold, right?
New goal.
Yeah. Is it similar up here too?
Very similar.
Yeah? Wow. Yeah, this is an area, I'll be honest, I've kind of balked at getting too much into, simply because it's kind of the third rail in Denver right now, water. And we have so many water districts. It's ridiculous, quite frankly, and there should be some consolidation related to that. But it's an issue in our region. It's an issue statewide because we get most of our water from the western slope, right? We don't even get it on our side of the hills. So there are compacts and all kinds of good stuff associated with that get to that point. But we do. We're required by our state water plan to have a plan for the physical growth and development of the region for the next 50 years. So the water supply, there's a planning exercise that has been done to accommodate that. But, it's a plan, right? And we're drawing a lot more. But what communities are required to do through state legislation, they're required to, or they can't, like landscaping and all that kind of good stuff. That's kind of going away now, right? Is basically any kind of irrigation associated with that. They have to basically make a pretty strong argument for how they're using the water. But I'm not a real expert on the water side, to be honest. But it's an issue, and those plans have to be in place for any type of development to occur.
Are you guys as dry as we are?
Yeah, we get about we're about 15 inches a year. Is what we get annually in rainfall. I don't know what it is here. Anybody know? 12? Yeah. Yeah, so, semi-arid environment, and I was actually shocked. The only reason I know that is because I looked it up. A buddy of mine from Oklahoma City asked me, because they get about 40 inches, and he thought we were about the same. I'm like, we're not even close to 40 inches, so. Yes?
Thank you for your interesting talk. I'm just intrigued to know if you have any tools, for example, to incentivize your partners to provide more housing in these TOD urban centers.
Yeah.
And when you're thinking about regional housing strategy, do you have any funding, for example, to again support
Yes.
non-market housing in those places for key workers like your teachers,
Right.
and other folks that might need it?
Right. Well, I'll answer the last question first on housing. We do not have any funding, at least at the regional level, to subsidize housing for the missing middle housing that we have, right? Now, there are, like I had mentioned, certain communities are doing deed-restricted housing that allows those teachers and firefighters and whatever better access to housing within our communities, but there's nothing at the regional, quite frankly, or even the state level right now that's available for. There's several like City County Denver, for example, they do have a pot of funds that will allow that can be used for subsidization of housing. But that's for the very lowest of AMIs within our region.
So it's just whatever comes from HUD, it's just
Yeah.
you simply facilitate.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So on the transportation, so on the other side of that, incentivizing like land use decisions or development decisions around transit-oriented development or higher density mixed use. Now we do have some leverage there. So we do get, as I mentioned, every 4 years we do call for projects, transportation projects, for about $500 million, right? So part of the solicitation that goes out on that we have, we have criteria in which we score projects, and those, before we do the call, the board decides on how they want to prioritize the funding pot through the scoring criteria. So the last call, if the infrastructure improvement, transportation infrastructure improvement, was associated with a higher mixed-use development or transit-oriented development, or it was active transportation, pedestrian, bicycle, whatever that might be, you got additional points. So to the extent that 73% of the funds that we allocated were either in or adjacent to higher density developments, existing or planned. So we're very fortunate in that respect that we get that federal money to be able to do that. But it's been really helpful for sure. Yes.
Just on the funding there, so I think you had talked about how there's that federal funding stream for MPOs. I noticed on that chart you had like $15 million worth of projects upcoming.
Yeah.
You talked about $10 million for the AAA. Where does all this funding coming from?
It-
Do the 58 county cities do they put into it? How much do the feds put in?
Yeah, great question. So our basic funding is the vast majority of our funding comes from federal and state sources. From federal sources, we get a little bit from the state. Federal sources. So the NPO work, the transportation work, that is exclusively federal. And then for like the older adult stuff, it's about equally divided between federal, the Older Americans Act, as well the Older Coloradans Act. We get about $10 million from each for services. And then we get local contributions from our member local governments. It represents about 1.5–2% of our total budget. And it's about $2 million a year that we get. And we use that money to match our federal money. So all of our federal money requires some type of match. Most of it is 80-20, 80 federal, 20% local. And it's only a very small portion of our total budget, but it's probably the most important part because we wouldn't be able to match our local money. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Good morning. Just curious, what's your connection or relationship with Metro Denver Economic Development?
Oh, wow. Wonderful, to be honest with you. So J.J. Amant, who's he's the president of the chamber, and Ray Gonzalez, who's Metro Denver EDC, we go back a long ways, and we work in tangent. Actually, that video that I showed right from the outset, they had a hand in developing that back in the day. But we do have a wonderful relationship. So we're actually working on an economic development designation. It's called Economic Development District designation. It's a federal designation that will open up our region to a bunch of other federal grants through Economic Development Administration. Economic Development Administration. So we work hand in hand with Metro Denver EDC and others that do that. But we've always had a long history with working on developing of our Metro Vision plan and the like with them. But they're great people down there. Yeah, you obviously know Ray. Yeah, Ray's a good dude. He was a county manager in one of our communities before he took this new gig on. But oh, good. That guy, he travels. He's something else. Gee, can't keep track of him. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you for the presentation. Two parts. You mentioned membership is voluntary. I'm just wondering, how has that membership changed over time?
Yeah.
And then how you kept people participating. I mean, funding seems to be a big part of that. But.
Yeah. No, well, on that last point, yeah, I know they're not there to see my pretty face, right? I know we talk about regional collaboration, all that kind of good stuff. And I'm not shy to say that, listen, I think it's okay that we have this money available that kind of incentivizes them to have a seat at the table. I don't care how we get them to the table as long as they're at the table, right? So, but you're right. I mean, just, straight up, right? That is a reason. But I will tell you that we've not lost a member in our 70 years. We've only added members. We have a new member coming on. Right now is called Mountain View. It's the size of a good neighborhood. That they basically have just seen the value of them having a seat at the table and having a conversation, right? But yeah, you're right. I think what we've really done, listen, it's very easy for me to be able to show the value of membership to like Denver, right? Because we bring in so much. I actually just did a calculation for them. Because they're going through the budget process right now. And, we get, just to give you a flair for how much their dues of our communities are, City, County, Denver, they have 2 seats, right? So one for council, one for the mayor. So they have 2 sets of dues. They pay about $600,000 annually to Dr. Cog. In return, what they get, their return on investment over a 4-year period, because it was easier for us to calculate that. So for $2.4 million they provide us over a 4-year period, they get back at minimum $70 million in investment. So, that's, I'm not the smartest man in the world, but I always tell them, if you can find another nonprofit or whatever, that you get that return on investment, you should sign up immediately. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
It just made me think of a question around, say, tax sharing or any agreements that might be in place between municipalities where taxes are shared based on the benefit of a development happening in one municipality versus another municipality. Is there any of those conversations happening through Dr. Cog?
Yeah, you know what? Kinda. And I tell you this, not the sharing of existing tax base, but future. We were actually given the authority a couple years ago in the state legislature to form a regional transportation authority. So we now have the ability to, based on, could be anything, right? Anything related to transportation, to actually do a ballot initiative, region-wide ballot initiative for infrastructure improvement. And our board's very curious about that, right? And I will tell you, it's somewhat strategic too, because there are some communities within our region that, tax initiatives for various things are pretty easy to pass, quite frankly. City, County, Denver is one. They have 2 initiatives on their ballot coming up in a couple weeks here that they're probably going to pass. One is related to affordable housing, actually, is a funding pot for affordable housing. Boulder never seen a tax increase. They haven't passed. They basically, they're all in. They get it, right? But it's harder in some of the other communities, right? And I think they see some value in being able to, in aggregate, go to the polls to pass some initiatives that, quite frankly, they might not be able to pass just locally. And understanding the value of that. But I think most initiatives that we've seen where regional transportation authorities have been set up is that they've sunset. Like, you have a list of projects, and once they're complete, completed, the tax just sunsets, as opposed to something that just goes on in perpetuity. Those are the ones that are not as successful that we found. Yes, sir.
Would the smaller communities that are surrounding Denver see the same kind of ROI as Denver? Like you mentioned that number, right?
Yeah.
Would the smaller communities see the same kind of return on investment?
Yeah. You know what? I didn't finish my answer over here related to City, County, Denver. Being the one thing I did want to mention was smaller communities. So since I've been executive director, again, I've been doing this forever and a day, right? And it's always been easy to show the values of Denver's and the large communities, right? It's the smaller communities, right? What do they get? Yeah, sure, they get a seat at the table, right? And are able to have a larger regional conversation. I think since I've been executive director, that we've gone out of our way to really show the value and provide, quite frankly, create a whole new program for our local governments. So for smaller communities. So we do, for example, we do this thing, we used to do it twice a year, we do it once a year now. It's called Small Communities Hot Topics Forum, in which we canvass our smaller communities, and we ask them, so what are the hot topics, right? What are the issues that you're dealing with in your city right now that you would like to have more expertise, right? Because that's, it's an issue with small communities, right, is resources and the ability, because just because you're small doesn't mean you don't have complex issues, right? It's just that, the Denvers of the world, they have, a battalion of staff to be able to take this stuff on. So we do these small community hot topics forums, and basically, so it could be like broadband. Broadband was a topic. So we brought in experts to talk about broadband and help our local communities actually apply for grants at the state and federal level to be able, because in mountain communities, for example, broadband is still a big issue. I mean, they just don't have it. And, in this day and age, regarding economic development, or just being able to Google some doctors. You can't do it, right? So, we've really leaned in with our local communities. We always consider ourselves extensions of all of our communities of staff, but we actually, we provide staff to our local communities in the areas of expertise, so planning and stuff like that, which quite frankly, they would never be able to afford, because the city clerk is also the planner, is also, what I mean? It's a lot, right? So I think that's one thing that we've really learned has been real successful, and they have true appreciation. And they're also eligible for all that federal funding that we get too. And we've developed a process with our federal funding in which we used to do it like one big central call where communities would submit projects to us, and then we would rank order the projects based on the criteria that the board approved, and then cut a line. Everything above the line was funded, everything below wasn't, right? Our board, some folks felt a little disenfranchised by that process, so we created a different process in which we now do sub-regional calls. So we do them by county. And those smaller communities within those sub-regions now have greater opportunity to get projects. And I think that has really been beneficial to us too. But yes, listen, it's near and dear to my heart because I've lived in very small communities through my time in the U.S. and I know how hard it is for those local communities. But yeah, it's a big deal. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You have a very large contingent of staff, 160.
Yes.
As we have 5. So can
Yeah.
you maybe explain some of the differences in terms of what the executive function is that you're doing there and what those things are that you're getting as the desired results?
As far as the executive function?
Well, just what you're able to achieve with that.
Oh, understood. Yeah, so it is. I think people are always surprised when they hear how many folks work at DRCOG. So half of those staff is related to our area agency on aging. So it's social workers, it's folks that are out in the field, case management, those types of folks that are out in the field doing stuff. So we have about planners and engineers, probably 30-ish that do most of the transportation-related work. But it does allow us, we have the luxury to be able to dive in deeper with our communities, like actually get out in those communities and help with the planning work. And it's intentional too. First, selfishly, it puts us, we're in front of our locally elected officials and their staffs all the time. But I really think, but also, we have a lot of expertise on staff. There's so many folks with PhDs running around our place. It's unbelievable, just the knowledge and experience that they have, right, related to the space. And it's been a true blessing. But listen, I've worked at an MPO where it was City County Topeka. It was Shawnee Topeka Planning Commission. They were the city and county as well as the MPO. I was the MPO staff person of one. So I'm well aware of the differences and the luxuries that we have that maybe they don't have here in Calgary. But I had an opportunity to meet, most of your staff here, and they're wonderful people and so smart. And I know that they're willing to help and get out in the communities if they're not already. I'm sure they are. But yeah, it's a different scale. There's no doubt.
Half is social workers. That's interesting.
Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thank you all so very much. Appreciate you, and looking forward to seeing you at your meeting here in a bit.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you,
so
sir.
much.
Appreciate you. Here, want this?
I think this may be on. If not, I'll just project. So, thank you, Douglas. So, again, a huge round of thank you, a round of applause. Thank you for Douglas for coming. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you as well. It's really gratifying to see so many members of CMRB, board members, mayors, reeves, councillors, a lot of the staff, but also students and just the general public, folks who showed up and may have seen it on LinkedIn or some of our posts. It is an important and I think pretty interesting topic. I'm struck, first off, just the slides were fantastic. I want everyone to know the slides will, if you didn't already receive them, will be posted to our website, and so you can download them. So, I'm struck by a few things. I'm struck actually by the similarities, obviously, between the Denver region and the Calgary region. We've got a lot of commonality, geography, industry. Some of the same growth pressures and challenges. And that, I think, is reflected in our growth plan, in your Metro Vision document. I do think there's a lot of overlap and a lot of similarities. I do wonder if maybe you could have a conversation with our federal and provincial governments on the funding side to perhaps see if we can arrange something similar to what you guys have our way. That would go a really long way. And obviously, you've got about a 65-year head start on us, give or take. So obviously, there's a lot of history baked into that. But what I find remarkable is how far we've come, I think, in our relatively brief, really quite brief, 6 years, in achieving some of the similar objectives. When I was looking through your slides there, that rhymes at least with a lot of what we're talking about and what we're doing. And I think that's really gratifying. And so, to that end, that's part of what we're here to do this afternoon. Board members and staff, we've got our board meeting coming up here at 1 o'clock upstairs, followed by a refresh of our strategic plan for the remainder of the afternoon. So for the board and staff, there's lunch upstairs. A little bit of chance, though, for everyone here to mingle and just connect with one another a little bit more. And so, again, thanks to all of you for your kind attendance, great questions, and attention. And Douglas, thank you again. Look forward to connecting and keeping in touch. Thank you.